deep inside, and I wanna talk about it. Can I trust you on my side? Cause I wanna talk about it. Dude, can you keep a secret? Keep a secret. Can you keep a secret? Keep a secret. Can you keep a secret? I wanna trust you. I wanna trust you. So can you keep my secret? You see this road gets tough, gets cold, but still never lose that hope. You got everything it takes and more. You're not alone in this war. Help is on the way every other day. You can lean on my shoulders, cause you are superhuman. You got my trust, and together we can be stronger. So we can talk about it. Yeah, we can talk about it, yeah. So we can talk about it. Talk about it, yeah, let's talk about it, yeah. I feel lonely deep inside, and I wanna talk about it. Can I trust you on my side? Cause I wanna talk about it. Dude, can you keep a secret? Keep a secret. Can you keep a secret? Keep a secret. Can you keep a secret? I wanna trust you. I wanna trust you. So can you keep my secret?
I can't hear you.
Forgive me, I've been on mute the whole time. Let's try that again. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
That's so embarrassing. Hi, everyone. Take two. Hi, everyone. And welcome to Psychcast Diaries. Can you keep a secret diaries? My name is Juanita Headley. I am a New York attorney and the founder and CEO of Changing Cases. You are listening to a set of discussions dealing with the issues of human trafficking, child abuse prevention, global issues, and of course, knowing how to respond to the question, can you keep a secret? Over the following weeks and months, I'm going to take a look at some hard hitting topics with a view to educate, empower, and inspire you to change the way that you think, act, and respond to better safeguard the children in your world. Stay tuned until the end of this show, where I'll share with you how you can get a copy of my new book, Can You Keep a Secret? How you can find out more information about my Zooms every Thursday and podcasts, and how you can have your questions featured on future episodes of this show. Today, I'm thoroughly excited to have an amazing individual whose book truly transformed and inspired my life. Want to introduce today Nita Belles. Nita, thank you so much for being here. It's truly an honor and a privilege.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, I want to start this by reading your bio. I have it here on my phone. For those of you who are used to being in the show, you know that I use multiple devices. So please show me grace and don't get distracted as I read it from my phone. Nita Belles is an speaker and leading national expert in the anti human trafficking movement. Her journey as a tireless crusader against human trafficking began in 2006 when she witnessed the cruelty of this atrocity and was compelled to take action. Each year since 2010, Nita's anti trafficking work surrounding the Super Bowl has been instrumental in holding traffickers and sex buyers accountable and recovering victims of human trafficking. In her years of dedication to this issue, from prevention to restoration, she has collaborated with top law enforcement, survivors, government officials, social service providers, medical professionals, and faith communities as the key to creating comprehensive, lasting change. Nita Belles, is there anything in addition that you'd like to add for those who are listening in and maybe have not heard of yourself, your organization, or anything that you do?
No, I don't need a big introduction. Here's Nita is all I need.
Well, thank you so much once again. Like I said, it really is an honor and a privilege even to meet you face to face via Zoom. I know it's been more than 6 years since we first interacted, and I was planning to come out to Oregon, but unfortunately, due to weather circumstances, it did not happen. It's amazing to have you on the show. We've had people from all around the world, from different parts of the US, but not yet from Oregon. One thing I can tell you is I know that they have the first vegan mall in Oregon, which is super exciting. But for those who know nothing about Oregon, let alone the vegan mall, can you tell us about Oregon? Tell us about the culture, how it differs from some of the other parts of the more well-known US?
Sure. Yeah, we are not a huge state. We have kind of two sides of the mountains, lots of mountains here, and rivers. I'm looking at a river right now. The western part of Oregon is pretty populated. It's Portland, Eugene, Salem, Medford. But I live on the eastern side, and we are high desert. So they get all the rain, and we get the sunshine. And they have more population than we do. They've got more stores. I'm sure that's where the vegan mall is. We have vegan options here, but not a mall. So yeah, we love it. Where I live, we do a lot of outdoors things, hiking, skiing, snowshoeing, biking, lots of outdoors things. That's kind of the emphasis where I live.
Thank you for sharing. And Lord willing, I'll get the opportunity to visit, to meet you in person, and to go to that vegan mall. Can you tell us how things have changed in the last 10 or 20 years from how it was maybe when you were younger to now? We, of course, know the internet has had a huge impact, both positively and negatively. But what are some of the major changes that you've witnessed over the last 2 decades or more?
In Oregon? Or
yes, specifically Oregon, yeah.
Specifically Oregon. Oh, there's been a lot of changes. Yeah, it's, I'm really saddened by what's happening in Portland right now with the rioting and looting and everything. That it's terrible. It really has, we're getting droves of people moving where we are because of what's happening in Portland. So I don't have a rosy answer for that. I believe that Oregon has gotten worse and our laws have gotten worse. They've become incredibly, well, we were one of the first states to legalize marijuana. We were the first state to legalize small amounts of hard drugs such as heroin, meth. People can carry that here and not have any penalties. And right now we're fighting a fight in the legislature. They're trying to legalize, decriminalize prostitution, which would be a disaster for human trafficking. We're calling it the Pimp Empowerment Act because there are no penalties to have a brothel. Law enforcement don't have the right to even question that. There's just no, law and order about it, so that there's little opportunity to help somebody that's being trafficked. And we know that when prostitution is decriminalized, that the amount of sex trafficking raises. In Germany, it was 70% when they decriminalized it. Nevada has 63% more sex trafficking than the next most sex trafficking state in the United States. And it's just tragic. You know, what we're trying to do is fight back with a model called the equality model. It's also known as the Nordic model, which would not penalize the person who is being sold, but it would have great penalties for the person who is selling them, i.e. the trafficker. And so the traffickers would have penalties, the buyers would have penalties. and there would be more services for those being sold, so they could get out and get safe.
And actually, what you share there, it's quite a lot. And for those who maybe don't understand the ins and outs of trafficking and the legalization of prostitution, it was fantastic for you to be able to shine some light, because I have been personally to Germany. I have not yet been to Amsterdam, but I've read articles and I've heard about how whenever a country decides to legalize prostitution, that this means that those who are traffickers and pimps now have the access to, in other words, it's almost like money laundering, to make their illicit activity no longer be illegal, but to sort of make it less criminal, so to speak. And the reality is that this is happening all around the world. And I would say a lot of people who believe in the legalization of prostitution do not study, do not research, do not spend time with victims and survivors who have been rescued, or even those who are still in an abusive or exploitative situation. And so when they say that, I believe that they're well-meaning, but they don't have all the knowledge which we would have from having done the work that we've both had the opportunity to do. And of course, as the Bible says, knowledge is power. And it is quite sad that there are so many people who really stand and say it needs to be legalized without realizing that there are so many negative consequences and repercussions to doing so. In relation to human trafficking, though, how did you first get knowledge of this issue? When did you first stumble upon it? Was it an article on the news, something that you had read? How did you first
In
on this
2006,
particular issue?
yeah, in 2006, I was working on my master's degree. My master's degree is in theology with a concentration in women's concerns. So, of course, this is a concern for women. And my professor, Nancy Murphy, was just amazing and took me to, we went to Vietnam, we went to Cambodia, and we saw some of the trafficking there. And in my mind, I'm thinking, wait a minute, I know that.
Educated on.
I'm sorry? You're cutting out. So anyway, I learned what it was, and I couldn't help but think this is happening in my country as well. And what if I did something about it in my country? And I felt like I needed to do that. And I asked God. I saw as I saw trafficking and as I read more about it, I said to God, "This is the worst thing I've ever seen on planet Earth. I have to do something. What do you want me to do?" And I was surprised by the answer because it wasn't an answer I wanted. I didn't like to write, and in fact, writing a paragraph for my master's degree was like, oh, I've got to write some more. And the Lord said, "I want you to write a book on human trafficking." And in 2006, there was nothing written about human trafficking in the United States. And so my book came out in 2011. I finished my degree in 2009. I was going to do it for my thesis, but I decided I didn't want the professors in my book. So I was able to do it then and finish it the first part of 2011. And yeah, that's how I got into it. By that time, because there was nothing written, I had to travel all over to talk to people with boots on the ground. And so that's how I learned about it. And by that time, I was already involved in anti-trafficking surrounding Super Bowl. And yeah, I started a group here in Oregon, and here we go.
That's really amazing. And like I share, and I say it with complete honesty and with sincerity, the book that you wrote, it really, really transformed and changed my life. It was such an inspiration. I remember when I finished reading the book, and I was in DC at the time, went to a restaurant. It was Asian, maybe Korean, Japanese, but not Chinese to my remembrance. And I saw a guy, he is originally from Africa. And after reading your book, I was thinking maybe he's a trafficking victim. And so it's like I was on the alert. After reading your book, I was just always looking out. How can I help this person? How can I? And I swapped numbers with the guy, and he told me that his living conditions were not great. So it's possible that they may have been labor trafficking. But truth be told, I think he had a crush on me, and so his motives were not very pure. However, I have a heart for helping people whose motives are pure. They're not sort of give me some sub story to get my number or go on a date or something. But your book really changed my life. And I remember reading it and the stories impacting me. And I remember writing to you, I think probably via email. In those days, it was email, not letter, pen and paper. And emailing, we spoke on the phone. But your book really is amazing. And I cannot speak highly of it because seriously, for that book, for people to read, to be empowered and to have the knowledge, I feel we all need it. And what is amazing, as you've just shared, is that it was very much a God orchestrated thing. And Absolutely. That is phenomenal. There are so many of us Christians who are more like lights under a bushel. We're not cities on a hill, and we hide our faith. And I think it's amazing that you can share so openly that you wrote this book. The Lord called you to write that book. And the fact that the book inspired me, a fellow Christian, to continue more is truly amazing. What advice would you have for a fellow author who wants to write on this topic? As you shared, you had to really be on the ground and do a lot of legwork and research. What advice would you have for somebody who wants to follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, actually. And thank you for your kind words about the book. And really, truly, I mean, I was obedient, but really it is the Lord. I had the outline right away. And that's what I tell people when they're wanting to write a book is really, if they're Christians, I tell them to really pray and get the outline from the Lord and find out what it is that God wants you to write about, because as long as we're obedient, that's all that really matters. And so do that. There's a lot of talk about self-publish versus publisher. I started out self-publishing because I had no platform. I had nobody was going to publish me, and I knew that, so I didn't even bother trying. And then by the grace of God, my first book did really well, and Baker Books contacted me and wanted to acquire it. And my first book was from a Christian perspective, because I thought this was going to be about the church. I had a background as a pastor and had done a lot of ministry, and I thought, well, of course I'll be talking to the church. But it turned out that that's really not how it worked. And I was talking to law enforcement, government agencies, schools. And so when Baker Books, who's a Christian publishing house, when they asked me to acquire the book, I asked that it be a secular book because it can open more doors, and it has. And so I would just say, you won't be marketed. You'll have to market yourself, and really just in all things, be obedient to the Lord, because you will never lose if you do that. That doesn't mean you're going to be, the next Billy Graham or, the next famous star. It just means that in the end, which is really what matters, is that we were obedient to the Lord, and that's all that matters. Whatever comes after that, that's all that matters.
And that's really inspiring, because what you shared there, it makes me think of the scripture, delight yourself in the Lord and he will grant your heart's desire. And I really feel that what you've just shared is an encouragement to authors, Christian authors, those who are leading a faith-based life, in the fact that the Lord is calling them to put pen to paper. The Bible says we've overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, and everyone has a story to share. And I'm just really amazed that you wrote your book, you obeyed God, and the Lord opened up the door that you maybe never even foresaw. And the fact is that the book has gone far and wide, and it is changing lives. And I think that's truly phenomenal. I'm really inspired, very much so, because even for myself, having written a book and some of the challenges in writing and getting the book to print, I know that when God is in something, no matter the obstacles that may come up, the Lord will ensure that things will always work together for good. And so that is really amazing. And it makes me even think about J.K. Rowling. I believe she's a non-Christian who wrote Harry Potter. And I've seen many posts on the internet that she was rejected about a dozen times and eventually. And that is the thing. Persistence truly is the key. Besides your strong faith in God, which is so resonant for all of us to hear, what is your greatest motivation in life?
I think it all stems from my faith in God, but having integrity is really important. Being responsible, doing what I say I'm going to do. We've worked with a lot of survivors over the years, and the one thing I know, and this is, it's a part of me, but when I'm working with survivors, it's like, even more so. And kids, it's like your kids, you do the same thing. You don't ever tell them you're going to do something that you're not going to do. People don't want to be let down. People don't want to be told, you know, to do something, or that you're going to do something, that you will, you will show up, that you will give them a meal, that you will take them somewhere. There, we don't, it's important that we are people of our word.
I most definitely concur. And I know that the Bible says that our word must be our bond. And it also says, yes be yes, no be no, which means when you say something, then you should commit to doing so. If not, it is better to say nothing at all. And unfortunately in life, I'm sure we've all had experiences and encounters where people will promise and not deliver. And when we have victims and survivors, it's about managing their expectations, which is truly important. And a lot of people don't realize when they've lost control, it is about empowering those victim survivors and giving them back the control that was taken from them. You've made reference to your book and the work that you've done with victim survivors. And of course, you have founded your organization, In Our Backyard. Can you tell us about In Our Backyard? Where did the name come from? The inspiration? I'm sure you're going to say God was involved there, but can you tell us more about your organization?
Well, I started an organization called Central Oregonians Against Trafficking Humans in 2009. And that was at the request of the U.S. Marshal over Human Trafficking in the state of Oregon, Keith Beckford. And so I started that in 2009. The name of my book, In Our Backyard, was really, again, just like the outline, it was given to me by the Lord. And then at some point, Central Oregonians Against Trafficking Humans changed so that it was not a Central Oregon organization, it was a national organization. By that time, I had some name recognition with my books. So I just said, we'll just be In Our Backyard, because I really feel like the reason that I was given that name was so that people would see it really is here. It's really here. You have to do something about something that's in your backyard, because it's there and it's right in front of you. You've got to do something.
And I think the name, it speaks volumes. Doesn't matter what country in the world that you go, you can use that name, In Our Backyard. It says so much. And the reality is in places like the Caribbean, where I am currently, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a lot of people do not believe it's happening in their backyard. And sad reality is sometimes it's in your very own household. And even when we have this lockdown at this current moment in time, that means there's an increase in OSEC, which we spoke about this morning with our guest from the Philippines, which is online sexual exploitation of children. With regards to your NGO, what are the highs and lows in running an organization? Because there may be people listening in who dream and aspire to join this fight and to set up their own NGO with, of course, a different name, because you've stolen the best name. You've taken it from us all. What advice would you have, and what are the highs and lows that you've experienced so that we can learn from them?
So I would say, I love talking about In Our Backyard. We've grown from having monthly meetings to educate the community about human trafficking to now being a national organization. We have 7 programs. We have a schools program. We have training and mobilization. We have a program called Convenience Stores Against Trafficking. And Convenience Stores Against Trafficking, we partner with the National Association of Convenience Stores and state associations. We have over 22,000 convenience stores nationwide that work with us to help stop trafficking. We have something called a freedom sticker. Freedom stickers are, they go inside the bathroom stalls. Let's see, I've got one right here so you can see it. And those can be obtained on our website. We don't charge, we do ask for a donation because of course it costs us money. And we're a nonprofit. We need to keep going. But we have placed more than 500,000 of those freedom stickers nationwide, and they go inside bathroom stalls because survivors helped us design this freedom sticker, and it's something that speaks to them. So they see this and are able to ask for help. Recently, they found a sex ad. Law enforcement found a sex ad in a convenience store where the picture was taken in the convenience store, and the freedom sticker was right on the mirror in the bathroom. So we're in the right place. So we've got that. We've got the Super Bowl program where we go and work with nonprofits, with government agencies, with police, law enforcement, for the last 12 Super Bowls, and just really to enhance law enforcement's effectiveness. We bring our own law enforcement with us, and then we work closely with the local law enforcement. So it's not a competitive thing, it's a support for the local law enforcement. And then we have the last program is legislative. So we do a lot of work surrounding legislature. So yeah, that when this bill was introduced in Oregon, we got a call from Nicosi saying, can you help? And so yeah, we're working with that to fight that and counteract with something better.
Can you tell us what Nicosi is for those who don't know?
National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Great group. They're awesome. Yeah.
And just another question for those of us who wouldn't know very much about the Super Bowl, where does that take place? And can you tell us what exactly it is? Because some of our viewers are from international and they wouldn't necessarily know what the Super Bowl is or where it takes place.
Okay, so Super Bowl is the American football, and it is the biggest sporting event of the year, and it takes place, it goes to different cities. We've been to 11 different cities. Miami, we've had it there twice. And so we go in ahead of time and begin planning and getting partners lined up and figuring out who aligns with how we do the work. And we partner, and we have a big event a week and a day ahead of Super Bowl where we go out to convenience stores, and again, the National Association of Convenience Stores comes with us. We have an outreach. People go out to the convenience stores, bring the freedom stickers, and talk to people. We also have, let me see if I've got one of the missing children's books here. Yeah, so here's an older one. We have missing children's books, and we take this out. And for the last couple of years, 14 or 15 of the 35 children in those booklets were recovered within a week of Super Bowl. And then after that event, we kind of go underground with law enforcement, and we have some great success working with them. We have some ways of getting intel that aren't common, and so it enhances the local law enforcement while we're there, and then we leave that operation with them so they have it when we leave. And our goal is to leave the place better than we found it.
What you've just shared there, I'm really inspired. Can you tell us again, how many children did you say were recovered?
This year, I think we had 14 out of 36. The last 2 years, we had 15 out of 36. And we don't go out and recover those children ourselves. We believe strongly in working with law enforcement, the National Center on missing and exploited children, NCMEC. And we work closely with organizations such as that, so that, and local organizations, because our goal is to empower others. We can't do it all ourselves, but we can empower others. So yeah, that's how we do it.
And that's amazing. And that's phenomenal, because at least we're hearing that results and things are happening. Aside from what you've just shared, how else has your organization made an impact, not just in Oregon, of course, but also throughout the United States?
You know, we have kind of a value, I guess you'd call it, in our backyard, and that is what we do for victims and survivors. And if we're not doing that, then it's time to pack up our bags and go home. And so, because of that, we've been able to really help survivors. We don't have direct services, but we get calls every week from people that need help. And we don't just give them a phone number and say, call so and so, they'll help you. We walk with that survivor until they get the help they need. And they contact us for years and years to come. And we love hearing their victories. We love hearing, the things that God's done in their life. And in fact, I just stepped down as the executive director of In Our Backyard, and actually stepped aside kind of because I'm now just the founder and the president. And we hired a new executive director, and she is a survivor of child sex trafficking. So she brings that lived experience with her to really understand the mission, and she's doing a great job carrying it out.
And of course, working with survivors, it makes complete sense, because to understand this issue and to be able to better protect, you need to be able to hear their voices. And even what you shared earlier about the photograph of the victim that was taken, and your sticker was right behind in the photograph, that speaks volumes. It says that you're exactly where you need to be. Of all the victims and survivors that you've met doing this work for such a long time, has there been any one particular story that has truly stood out, that has truly affected you?
You know, each story is unique in its own. One of my favorite stories, though, is Wendy Barnes, and she has her own book, and I love her book. It's called And Life Continues. So I highly recommend that book. Wendy was a young gal that felt a little awkward, had never had a boyfriend. And at 16, 15 or 16, a boy by the name of Greg came to her at school, and he was popular and she wasn't, and he wanted to pay attention to her. And she, was very flattered and was delighted to become his girlfriend. She got pregnant, and once she had the baby, she and Greg were living together, and they were out of money. And she said, Greg, we've got to do something. The baby needs formula and diapers. And he said, well, if you really love your baby, you'll do what it takes to get those. And Greg came from a trafficking family, and it was his intent all along. He trafficked her for 13 years. They have 3 children together. And Greg is currently housed in prison in Oregon without possibility of parole, because he trafficked hundreds of girls, and he liked the young girls, the teens. And Wendy says the first time she ever felt free, what happened in the end for her in the end of trafficking was that they were in the house one day, and Greg was upstairs and she was downstairs. And of course, she knew when police came what she was supposed to say and do. And she just decided that day, I'm not doing it. And so police came to the door and they said, is Greg Hightower here? And she said, he sure is. He's upstairs. And so she thought, this is my chance. Now I'm going to be free. But after they had him cuffed and questioning upstairs, they began to question her. And she was arrested on the same charges that he was and did time. She was convicted. She was given a court appointed lawyer, and the lawyer told her, just plead to these charges and it won't be a big deal. You're going to be a registered sex offender, but it's not really going to be a big deal. She lost her children when she got out of prison. She couldn't see her children. And she was registered as sex offender everywhere she went. And this story has a fabulous ending, not ending, but new chapter that just happened at the end of last year. We'd been pleading for about 7 years with the governor of Oregon to give Wendy a pardon. And she called me last November and was just practically screaming on the phone. I just got a call from the governor's office. I've been pardoned. And so she is pardoned. And in fact, we're going to have her story in our newsletter here soon. And all of her children are in touch with her now. She didn't get to raise her youngest. He was an infant when she was arrested, and she never did get to raise him. He was raised by his grandmother, Greg's mother. But she's an amazing woman, and has my highest respect and regard.
Can you kindly share the title again of that book?
And Life Continues by Wendy Barnes.
I'm speechless. And you mentioned about the family being attracted.
You're cutting out. I can't. You wanted me to talk about the family being a trafficking family. Was that right? I can't hear you. You might want to nod your head if that's right. All I'm hearing are little tones.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, now I hear you.
I was nodding, but I guess you couldn't see me. Yes, please. If you could share, that'd be brilliant.
Okay. Yeah. So, just like some people are in the grocery business, some people are in the farming business, there are those who their families do trafficking. And Greg Highterra came from one of those families. So it's the father, the grandfather, um, and the kids, and the women are often trafficking victims. They traffic their wives, their girlfriends, their sisters. So it's just the way it is. There are a lot of trafficking families.
Thank you for elaborating. I've just had to move because my battery is dying. And I know we spoke earlier about the case or cases of sports trafficking. Can you give us a bit of understanding of what sports trafficking is? I mention it often in presentations, but a lot of people have not heard about it, don't even know what it is. Could you give us a bit of an understanding on that?
Sure, yeah. So trafficking occurs anytime there is money to be made. And so traffickers just look for those opportunities, whatever that money opportunity is. And of course, there's money in sports. And so traffickers will recruit people. It's happened a lot in baseball. So they recruit young men who are very talented, and they pay for some of the things that they're doing with the knowledge that when this young man gets to the United States, everything that they earn goes back to the trafficker. So I don't know a lot of details about those cases, but absolutely it happens. And traffickers exploit young men in sports. And when they get here, they're not really free. I mean, they look free, but they're bound by contracts and having to give their money away.
And actually, what you've just shared there makes me think about the entertainment industry and how a person indeed could likewise be trafficked in entertainment when, as you've said, they are tied up in these contracts, which also leads towards bonded labor, where although it is not a written contract, this person and their family are in debt and in debt and in debt, which is something we see very often in places like India, when they have to borrow money to get equipment for the brick kiln to be able to build bricks, etc. Having read your book, which I gotta say again, truly is so inspirational and really life transforming, I remember there was a story about some children who were orphans who were trafficked in a choir. Can you share a bit about that story for those of us who've not yet read your book?
Oh yeah, and that story has a very happy ending too. So there was a man, Pastor Grimes, I believe his name was, who went to oh geez, I can't remember the country now. Anyway, he went to another country and where there was extreme poverty, and he began recruiting young boys for this boys choir to come to the United States. And one of the young boys was given Capacia, and Given was one of the younger kiddos that came over. They were taken from church to church to sing, and that sounds pretty innocent, but they were hardly fed. They were given like $12 a week to buy food and to have food. So they just hardly had anything to eat. And when they slept in host homes. When they went to the host homes, they weren't allowed to say anything about the conditions that they lived in or the way that they were treated. When they weren't in the host homes and in choir, they were in a double wide trailer in Texas in the desert. And this man was horrific to them. Again, they had hardly anything to eat. And he decided that he would make them dig a swimming pool. And I mean, it was an impossible task. They were given not even shovels. They were digging it with their hands. And and they were in no air conditioning, and the heat was tremendous in that double wide trailer. They were treated deplorably. One of the host homes realized that something wasn't right and finally got the boys to talk. And INS came and said, "This is terrible. We've got human trafficking here." And my friend Sandy, who became Given's American mom, arranged for all the boys to have a place to go live with people in the church. And Sandy took Given in, and Given went to school. He's just such a remarkable young man, always has a positive attitude, loves Jesus with all his heart, and that is like the heartbeat of his life. They live in Dallas, and Given is now a dentist in Dallas. He went to dental school and graduated. He has his own dental practice in Dallas, Texas. So just an amazing ending to that story. But yeah, trafficking can happen anywhere. It happens anytime somebody can make money. And that's what this Pastor Grimes would do. He would go to churches, take an offering, and he would get the money. And he was not sending it to a boys' school like he said in the country. He was doing it for him, keeping it for himself.
And I remember the story very, very vividly. I think they may have been in Uganda or some part of Africa, but hearing stories like that, it can make us actually lose faith, lose hope in church, in pastors. In fact, there is a pastor in the US. I'm trying to recall where, it may be Pennsylvania. Gregory Dowes, I believe is his name, and him and his wife went over to Kenya, built an orphanage there. However, he was sexually abusing the girls from age 11 upwards, about 4 girls. And his wife was, in fact, taking these girls to the sexual health clinic and giving them an implant. And when I read that, I was so outraged. I hear so often about abuse, and I've become almost desensitized to hearing about males abusing females. But what made me so outraged was that his wife was taking these girls to receive contraception that would ensure for the next 3 years they could not get pregnant. And things like that really hurt us as Christians. Even the recent case of Ravi Zacharias, who passed away last year, information has come out that he was raping the women who give him massages. He was using his position and power for improper reasons. What would you say to people who are listening in and have lost faith in God or in pastors? What would you say to us? It's sometimes difficult for us to continue to trust in the church and the body when we hear serious stories like what you've shared and what I've just shared.
Yeah. And, we are a fallen people, and there is corruption everywhere. And, honestly, there's corruption in everyone's heart. It's the original sin. I have corruption in my heart. Sometimes I eat too much. Sometimes I don't take care of myself. Sometimes I don't do what I say I'm going to do. Sometimes I'm angry. Sometimes, there's corruption in all of our hearts. And I think that corruption plays itself out in the church, where there's sometimes a cover for that. And so I think it's just really important. Again, there's going to be corruption. There was corruption in the day of Jesus. Jesus was more angry with the religious Pharisees who were misappropriating funds, who were mistreating people, than he was with the woman caught in prostitution. And I haven't done this study yet, but I'm looking for the time to do it. I still think that a lot of the stories that we see as prostitution in the Bible were trafficked individuals. But Jesus didn't have as much a problem with her as he had with the religious who were not doing, he called them whitewashed tombs. And we've still got those today. I think it's important that we not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are going to be bad people in any venue, and it's important that we are in church and being around the body of Christ. We need each other, and it happens. There's no reason to deny that the corruption doesn't happen, but we've got to keep our eye on the prize, care for those who've been harmed, challenge those who are doing the harming, and really just it boils down to day-to-day obedience.
And actually what you just shared there, the woman you mentioned who was caught in prostitution, I'm presuming you mean the woman who was caught in the midst of adultery. It's interesting when we read those stories.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, we don't consider beneath the surface. The Bible talks about tree, branches, and fruit, but we don't often scratch beneath and try to understand more context, culture. Because when we can, as you've rightly said, these may indeed be instances of human trafficking. In fact, one of the first human trafficking stories is Joseph in the Bible. He was labor trafficked by his brothers. I'm interested to know, though, what is your opinion when it comes to the whole term of child prostitution? Do you believe that prostitution is sex work, that it is the oldest profession in the book? What are your views on those two things?
No, I don't think it's the oldest profession in the book. I think it's the oldest form of exploitation in the book. And when you didn't see the hair come up on the back of my head when you said child prostitute, it just absolutely sends me that term, because there is no such thing. In the United States, anyone who is under 18 who is involved in a commercial sex act is a victim of human trafficking, according to the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. So how can you call that victim a prostitute? There is no such thing as a teen prostitute or a child prostitute. Um, it's we've got to help. We've got to help. The average age of entry is 12 to 14 years old for girls, 11 to 13 for boys. We've got to help. We've got to save our kids.
And I agree, because recently I was doing an interview, in fact, just yesterday, and one of the people on the show used the term sex work, and I get so uncomfortable. And I usually stay very quiet unless I'm asked a direct question. I don't say anything, but I'm very uncomfortable with the word sex work or child prostitute, no such thing. In fact, one of the books that really changed my mind and understanding of this sex work and it not being sex work is a book by Rachel Moran called Paid For. As a practicing Christian, I have never believed prostitution is a job under any circumstances, but her book gives so much vivid detail that it further instilled in me the reason why it is not a job and can never be. And what I find fascinating, when people use the term sex work, that isn't in relation to their son or daughter. It's in relation to someone else's son and daughter. And it's fascinating that of all the professions, this is one profession that their children cannot engage in, but everyone else can. And I find that fascinating. It bothers me a lot, but I'm just like, interesting. When they use the term so freely, would they want their Ivy League son or daughter to be a prostitute? And we know the answer is obviously no. What you shared earlier about these young children in the orphan who are in the choir, the vulnerability there would, of course, be coming from an impoverished background, lack of finances, which is one of the reasons why this individual was able to go around and appeal to the hearts of individuals in the church for donations and funding. What are some of the major forces that allows human trafficking to persist even today?
I think when we don't talk about it, I always say there's only one thing a trafficker asks of you and me, and that is that we don't talk about it. Because if we don't talk about it, they can go on and commit that crime against humanity day in and day out. We've got to talk about it. So I would think that is the most important thing. Talk about this, educate people, and prevent it. When I'm sitting in a motel room, and sometimes law enforcement will ask me to come when they do a sting so that I can be with the victims they recover. And when I'm sitting there on the bed with somebody who has just been recovered from a trafficking ring, my mind goes to how could I have prevented this? Because I know every day the rest of her life, she is going to have to deal with the horrific trauma that she has received as a result of this. And so prevention is so important. We talk about it. That's why we have our schools program. We want to prevent children from ever suffering in trafficking so that they can go on and lead normal lives.
And prevention is key. And of course, as a public speaker myself, I believe in education and empowerment. And even earlier, you made reference to empowerment. It's really important to give people the tools to protect themselves, to be safeguarded, even having that sticker up there, talking to victims and survivors and enabling them to be empowered in helping others. With regards to human trafficking, what would you say are, I'm just looking at my question here, I forgot. What would you say is being done to address the root causes of human trafficking currently?
The root causes of human trafficking, people traffic because of money. And the root cause, in my mind, is inequality. If we all believed that everyone in this world was equally valuable and equally important, we would not have trafficking. And so we've got to address that people are equal, not one person is above the other, and treat one another with that kind of respect. If that was being done, we wouldn't have trafficking.
Thank you. And of course, I know having traveled thus far to 38 countries, often the belief is that trafficking either requires poverty or it requires movement. But in fact, it's merely about vulnerability. The young girl you mentioned, this gentleman, well, he was a student at the time. He used love, he used the means to groom her through building a relationship, moving in together, and having children. At this current time, what would you say? I keep forgetting my questions. I'm so engrossed in what you're saying. At this current time, what would you say is the mindset of Americans? Do they believe, as is in most countries, that human trafficking requires foreigners coming in or locals going out? Would you say that's still the common belief? Or is there more understanding of domestic trafficking?
I think people have a better understanding of that. When I first started, everyone thought that the problem occurred overseas. They didn't even entertain the idea that it could happen in the United States. And then it went from that to, well, but it doesn't happen in my backyard. It doesn't happen here because of whatever. And then when we finally, people realized, yeah, it really is happening right here in our backyards, then they thought it was always a foreign-born national. We're starting to overcome that now. I've seen so much progress in this movement in the last 15 years. Um, People are understanding that it's happening. They're understanding that it's wrong. Um, I'm really concerned about the pro-sex workers movement that's trying to legalize it all across the United States. There are 4 states, um, including Oregon right now, that have a bill that's trying to decriminalize. I'm concerned about that movement, and I think we have to rise up and take a stand against it because it's for our children, our grandchildren. We can't have that.
I completely concur. And I want to ask, I know we're going to be wrapping up very soon, but with regards to the offense that is being committed of trafficking, and we're referring to the perpetrator, not the victim, what do you believe is an appropriate punishment? Of course, laws are now changing where survivors are no longer being arrested or even given a register where their name is down as being a sex offender. Things are changing. It's taken a long time to get there, but finally it is happening. What do you believe is an effective deterrent or punishment for perpetrators of human trafficking?
I think long-term imprisonment is really important. To have them get by and with a slap on the wrist, that's got to stop. And then in the prisons, when they're in the prisons, they still traffic from the prison. They've got victims that are putting money on their books. They're doing that. So we've got to get smarter about how we allow that happening out of our prisons. Yeah, so long-term punishment and watch those prisons a lot better than we're doing right now.
And I concur. For me, as a Christian, I do not believe in the death penalty whatsoever. I believe in second chances, but I believe in incarceration for the safety of others. And I've observed, even being here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and in the prisons, some of the inmates learn to read and write, they learn skills. And if they do leave, there are some who truly become productive members of society. With regards to victims, if there is somebody listening in who is in a situation that is exploitative or is even, God forbid, a trafficking victim, what advice would you have to give them if they were listening in today?
I would want to instill hope in their heart because victims of human trafficking often feel they have no options. And I would say you have options, that God sees you today right where you are, and you need to ask God for a way out. And if you're in the United States, call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is 888-3737-888. They'll give you the option of whether you want law enforcement involved or not. It's just there's a way out and there's hope. You can be a Wendy Barnes. You can be a Cheryl Chickey, who's our executive director. There is a way out. There's a hope and a future.
And I love that. What you've said there reminds me of Jeremiah 29, that
Absolutely.
God has plans to give us a hope and a future. My question, I have a few more questions and we'll be wrapping up. What are some of the ways that you've been able to give back to society besides your book and your organization? What are some other ways?
Wow. I I don't know. I've been so consumed with that over the last 15 years that really that has been what I've done. We do other things. We do missions trips occasionally, but really, I think the biggest contribution to society is the challenge that God gives me. I'm a workaholic, and I'm constantly pushing and trying to get the most out of every minute. And sometimes that makes me impatient. And God has been leaning on me for the last couple of years about love and really being loving to other individuals. Because First Corinthians 13 says that we can do all of these things, but if we have not love, we've got nothing. And so I think love for the clerk at the store, for the and this is the big challenge for me, for the person that I can't understand on the phone in another country trying to help me when I call for help on my computer or whatever, for people in our own homes, in our own households, our own families that maybe, we don't feel what they're doing is right. Um, the challenge is to love. And that to me is the biggest challenge and what I try to do outside of what I do.
Thank you. And I completely concur. I was actually going to quote First Corinthians 13 when you mentioned love, because the reality is that there's so many of us who don't truly know what love is. And that is how we end up being lured into relationships that are abusive, like domestic violence, or God forbid, human trafficking. I want to ask, I keep forgetting my questions. I'm so engaged that I keep forgetting. I want to ask, how can you continue to be a voice for gender equality?
Uh, that is where I started out. Gender equality. I say I'm a flaming egalitarian, and gender equality is so important. And Jesus treated women equal in a time where it was not okay for a man to speak to a woman. Jesus spoke to the woman at the well that nobody else in town would speak to. And she was the first person that was sent to preach. Not just the first woman, she was the first person that was sent to preach. Go tell the community about me. And I just think that is, again, the key to stopping trafficking. That's the key to everything, is believing that we're all equal, and that we all have the right to be all God created us to be, and not to hold people back. I've over the years, I've done a lot of work in churches, and I, my husband and I were giggling the other night about a church that I went to, and of course my message is always equality, and they had me come and speak, and it was a church that didn't allow women to speak, and it almost split the church, but it did so much good because people really began to look not just at the human trafficking issue, but at the gender issue, which we've got to empower women. They're half or more than half of our population, and we need all the workers we can get. We need all they're precious and valuable in the sight of the Lord. The Lord created them. And so we need to honor them the same way God does. And that doesn't mean to dishonor the men either. The anger of some of the feminist movement against men is very wrong, is equally as wrong as uh, disregarding women. So again, it comes back to First Corinthians 13, love for all, equality, and that would make the world a different place.
And I'm so glad you actually said that, because there's a group on Facebook. It's a Trinidad Women's Empowerment Group. And a lady actually shared a picture of her sister and said her sister is in a domestically abusive relationship. And a lot of the comments that were there, why doesn't she leave? She needs to leave. You need to leave. And other comments were very negative. In fact, they were threatening towards her partner and saying that they would beat him up and all this kind of thing. And we need to draw the line there, because not that I'm agreeing with that behavior, but sometimes these men are maybe victims themselves. Sometimes they are victims of abuse in their childhood. Maybe it is circumstances. There's so many reasons why a person will lash out violently towards another. And by using violence and force, that will not solve the problem. And so you're completely correct there. It is not saying that all men are bad or all men are rapists or all men are pedophiles. That is not the reality. There are good people out there, and many of these good men are doing great work, in fact, to encourage and inspire other men that you do not need to get your wife to respect you by using violence or force. And even as you spoke about gender equality, it makes me think about one of the vulnerabilities is being a female in certain cultures and communities when we think about child marriage. Far too often when we hear the word vulnerability, we think poverty. But in fact, it could be your language, it could be being a refugee, LGBTQ, or merely being female, growing up in a community where you're expected to provide for your family by going into prostitution at a young age or even child marriage. Yeah. What is one thing that you wish you could do, but you cannot because of restrictions of finances, language, etc.? What is one thing you wish you could do, but you can't?
Well, I'm pretty optimistic. There's one dream I have to do, and we're on our way. We haven't done it yet. There's a lot of hurdles ahead, but my hope is to have these freedom stickers in every bathroom stall, every public restroom in the United States. And we've made a lot of headway with that. When I first put them together, I had people say they'll never go anywhere. And by the grace of God, we've gone viral with freedom stickers now. We get so many orders, we can hardly handle them. And I love it because we know about the little girl that was in a convenience store restroom with one of these on the mirror, and they're in the right places. And we've just got to help. So there's a dream I have, and I think it's just going to take a lot of work, but we're here to do it.
And that's amazing. In fact, I know of an individual, I believe his name is Randall White, and I read an article about him, and he has similar stickers. They're obviously not freedom, but they have the same kind of concept and idea. And I believe he's in Texas. In the UK, we have something similar at airports. And in fact, that's one of the reasons we did connect, because I'm working on my own freedom stickers in the UK, in the Philippines. Every country I set foot on, I want it to be a variation of freedom stickers. And so the dream you have for the US, I have that dream for the world. And when God is for you, no one can be against you. And it's so amusing because people may come with their words, their advices, often unsolicited, about your book, about your organization, about your stickers. But when God is in it, you will excel. And I'm so encouraged by that. And I really hope the audience likewise have been listening and have heard the theme throughout. With God, all things are indeed possible. Do you have any last words? Any last words at all?
I would just say, keep talking about this. Thank you, Juanita, for having me on. Thank you for your heart. I think we are just right. Our belief systems are exactly almost the same. I haven't heard anything from you that isn't a part of my belief system. So yeah, we've just got to keep doing this fight. There are people that need it and deserve it, and God's called us to it. So yeah, keep loving, keep caring, keep working, keep talking.
Thank you so much. I'm truly, truly honored. Would it be okay for me to just say a brief prayer before we let you go?
It would be great.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So for those who are listening, if you would kindly close your eyes and bow your heads, I would just love to pray. And I'm trusting God, my Wi-Fi will not kick out in this prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for Nita Belles and for the organization in our backyard. She is doing truly amazing work. Over the last 2 decades, she has really made a tremendous impact in the United States and even internationally. I pray that her book is going to go far and wide. I pray that eyes will be opened. I pray for breakthrough and for freedom. I thank you, God, that you are going to enable victims and survivors to get the help and the healing that they need. I pray for Nita Belles, for her life, for her ministry. I pray that she'll continue to be a light that is not under a bushel, a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. She has a voice, and she is using that voice to honor and glorify you and to set the captives free. It is truly an amazing, tremendous opportunity to have her on the show. She is really being used by you. And I thank you so much because I know that you are a good God. You're a God that never fails. You're a God that comes through. You're a God whose ways and thoughts are not our own. And so I am so amazed by her love for you and the fact that you have come through for her time and time again. I pray that every one of us who has heard today's session has truly been touched and inspired. We know you are the same yesterday, today, forever. And if you can do all of this for Nita Belles and in our backyard, what more can you do for the rest of us who are in this fight? So I thank you for her life. I pray she'll have many more glorious years on this earth. I pray I'll have the opportunity to meet her face to face on earth or at least in heaven. Thank you so much, God, for all you're doing and all you will continue to do. In Jesus' mighty name, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much, Nita.
Thanks for having me on. God bless you.
You too. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And thank you so much for all the listeners who have tuned in today to Psychcast Diaries. I trust the information has been useful to you. We all need knowledge and education to be empowered. For you to get the copy of my new book, Can You Keep a Secret? Or for you to be able to access the information of my Zoom, my podcasts, please reach out to me on my website, changingcases.org. That's changingcases.org. We all need knowledge and power to be able to better safeguard the children in your world. Education is liberation. Please share this with friends and family members so they too can be educated, empowered, and inspired. God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.